Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this event, To Affinity and Beyond, a community that we're building for people who, like us, have a deep interest in consumer analytics and data science. My name's Pete Denby. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer and co-founder at Hyper. If you haven't come across our business before, we use data science and AI to help retailers and brands make more intelligent decisions. Simple. And consumer analytics and data science is a subject that we're really passionate about. Several people in our business have been involved in the industry for quite a few years now, well before the term data science was well known, in fact. And, you know, we feel it's the most exciting part of the broader data industry. And I think that's because it's so familiar to everyone. So we're all really familiar with shopping for groceries, for clothes and various other things. And I think most people who are involved in the event and are tuning in today are fascinated about analysing consumer behaviour and needs, creating insight from that analysis, and then using that insight to make better commercial decisions. And we actually think that this particular area of the data industry is really underserved in terms of a community. There's lots and lots of groups out there now that cater for data as a wide subject, but very few that look specifically at the consumer aspects. And, you know, we really aim to change that. So we're creating this community, which is for practitioners, so people who are hands-on doing consumer analytics and data science, for people who are really looking to get into the industry, and for people who might not be hands-on but have a vested interest in the area. And we want to create a series of events. This is the first one of those, create content and create opportunities for people to interact with each other. So you can learn from your peers, you can upskill and you can interact, and ultimately increase your kind of subject knowledge and value as someone that's involved in consumer analytics and data science. This is the first of our events, so we're using a pretty basic, straightforward format today. We've got a talk followed by a panel and opportunities for people to ask questions. So if you want to do that, please use the Q&A function within Zoom, and we'll do our best to answer those questions. And we're also going to follow up after the event to get the thoughts of various people. We're keen to understand what worked well, what we could improve, subjects that we might cover on future occasions, other speakers that we might have, and ways that you'd like to interact with the community, either through events or content or a LinkedIn community. So we'll come out and ask those questions. But to today's event. So in about 20 minutes time, we've got a panel that my colleague Jag Tumba is going to host, and that's going to be looking at the skills needed to get into consumer analytics and data science and then to thrive in your career. So we've got a brilliant panel. We've got Charlotte Barnes from Asda, Michelle Morris from the University of Leeds, and Anna Cescon from Hyper. So they're going to cover that. And before then, my colleague Jessie Stuart is going to talk about a topic that I think is really familiar to all of us, particularly over the last couple of years, where online shopping has really accelerated due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I think we've all felt the frustration of online shopping substitution fails. So Jessie's going to talk about that and talk about how to avoid succumbing to similar fails. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Jessie.
Thanks very much, Pete. I'll just share my screen now. So I hope all of you can see that. Someone please shout if you can't see my screen. So hi everyone, I'm Jessie. I'm an analytics manager at Hyper Group, and I've worked here for about 2 years now. Before working at Hyper, I've had a variety of different data and analytics roles across a few different industries. So I've worked in the gambling industry, I've worked in financial services and in public health before moving into retail. Originally I'm from Leicester, which is where this dazzling accent comes from, and I lived in Leicester for 18 years before I went to uni to study maths in Leeds, and I've just never left. And when I'm not playing with data, I'm usually found hanging upside down with a trapeze or a hoop or anything else in the air, because I'm dead into aerial arts at the minute. And at the bottom of this slide, I've just popped some of my contact details in case any of you like to ask a question, or even if you just like to send me your worst online supermarket substitution fail, because I've really loved finding out about them whilst I've been researching for this talk, so I'd love to hear yours too. But past that, I don't think this needs too much more of an introduction, because I'm sure any of you who've done an online shop at some point in the past will recognise this phrase. So picture the scene: you've done your online order, you're waiting in your allotted delivery slot for it to arrive, and the delivery driver turns up, he hands you that sheet of paper that's got listed everything that you've bought in your online shop. And unfortunately, these words are on there, which is that some of the items you ordered were out of stock today. And that's usually accompanied by the sinking feeling when you're thinking, oh no, what have they been stocked for? Some retailers get it right, but much too often it goes really wrong, which leads to a really bad customer experience. So I'm going to dive into a quick game of guess the substitution. I'd normally say shout out your guesses, but since it's online, it doesn't quite have the same effect, so don't. But I'll give you a quick disclaimer that all of these are actually true. So back to the scenario from before, our online shop has arrived, and unfortunately our soft white rolls that we wanted are out of stock. So we could guess what these might be swapped for: maybe a crusty white roll, or a loaf of bread, a baguette, a wrap, or even a pita bread. But you probably wouldn't guess that they'd be swapped for sausage rolls. And you'd be even more annoyed if you're a vegetarian. Gardening this week, so we're going to use it to tend the flower beds or do some weeding. Probably weren't planning on using it to eat our dinner with. But I suppose you can kind of see where they were coming from. Maybe they're both called forks. They both look kind of the same. So surely we're going to get better from it. Next up, we went on a walk in our nice white trainers with the red shoelaces, and unfortunately the shoelaces snapped, so we needed to add some to our online order this week. Probably wouldn't guess that these would be swapped for strawberry lace sweets. Don't think I'd really fancy trying to tie my shoelaces with these. And now I've got some quick fire fails for you, which I found on a fantastic Twitter thread called Substitution Fails. So if you fancy losing 10 minutes of your life down a rabbit hole, definitely look at that, because some of them are fantastic. So first up, this poor customer ordered a bunch of spring show flowers, and they were swapped for a less nice bunch of spring onions. But fortunately, the customer maintained their sense of humour and put them in a vase for the purpose of the tweet. Next, thanks, can't wait to crumble some flapjack onto my stir fry tonight. I don't think that needs any more explanation as to why it's a bad substitution. My personal favourite, which is that moment when your Max Factor mascara is substituted with plain poppadoms. I've got no idea how this can happen. I can't even think of any kind of similarity between mascara and poppadoms. And last but not least, ordered bread, and we received this. I guess we'll be making our own then. So this poor customer ordered their loaf of bread and it got swapped for some bread mix. So not ideal. But why do problems like this occur? Usually because the decisions are made manually and under time pressure, which means that there's then no consistency in the decision making. If decisions like these that seem natural or common sense could be automated using data, then it would increase that consistency and lead to a much better customer experience. However, there is a massive shortage of data science and AI talent that's needed to create the automation. And even if the talent was available, there's very few accessible and affordable ways of scaling this across a large scale business so that it can be used by the employees on a regular basis. But in this case, we're going to focus on how data can be used to solve the problems like this on a large scale. And rather than getting too theoretical straight away, I'll roll back to one of the examples we saw earlier, which was the red shoelaces that were out of stock. So let's imagine we work for an online shop, and one of our customers has ordered these red shoelaces. They're out of stock, so we need to decide what to substitute it for. To do this, we need to be able to automate the decision that the customer would make if this was to actually happen in real life. So say that the customer was doing the shop themselves, they'd seen that the shoelaces were out of stock. What would they choose to have them substituted for? So we need to be able to personalise these decisions to suit the particular customer. And that's where Affinity Analytics comes in. So Affinity Analytics is a set of techniques that you can use to understand the retailer's offering through the eyes of the customer. And it can be split into three main areas. So first of all, we have affinity, which discovers the underlying relationships between customers and products, looking at the products that a customer is buying in each of their visits. You've also got attributes, which are ways in which we can describe products. And you can also use attributes to describe customers. So for example, a product could be gluten-free, so you could tag it with the gluten-free attribute. But also a customer could be really likely to buy gluten-free products, so we could also tag that customer with the gluten-free attribute. And we can then use affinity and attributes in combination to create customer need states. And these are really important for substitutions. So I'll come on to those in a bit more detail later on. But affinity is a really good place to start because you only need really simple transactional data to achieve this. All you need to know is what products your customer is buying in each of their visits. Once you know this, you can calculate basket affinities, which are looking at which products are bought in the same visit. And you can also calculate customer affinities, which is looking at which products are bought by the same customer. Once you have basket affinities, you can infer that these products within the basket affinities are complementary to each other. So they make really good product bundles or recommendations to add to a basket. So an example of this could be cereal and milk. However, if you use basket affinities and customer affinities together, you can see which products are likely to be bought by the same customer, but never within the same visit. And then using this, you can infer that the products are competing with each other. Competing products tend to be really similar and can be swapped for one another. And that's why they make really good substitutions, because if one of them was out of stock, the demand would transfer to the other. I've got an example of this on quite a small scale. So I'm going to introduce you to my character, who I've named Hyper Harry, and he's really nicely branded to match my slide deck. But unfortunately, his shoes are definitely on the wrong feet, so just don't look too closely at that. So Hyper Harry has entered our online shop, and in his first visit, he's bought cornflakes, milk, and a variety of red shoelace. In his second visit, he's again bought cornflakes and milk and another variety of red shoelace. And in his third visit, again, he's bought cornflakes, milk, and red shoelaces. So using this example, we would infer that the cornflakes and the milk are complementary products because they're always bought together in the same visit. However, the three different types of red shoelace are actually competing products because they're bought by the same customer, but never within the same visit. However, I appreciate that this is fairly an unrealistic example because, let's be real, what kind of customer is buying three different types of red shoelace in the 3 visits they've made to your store in their lifetime of shopping? So sometimes it's easier to think of competing products in a different way. So for this example, I'll use carrots instead. So imagine you've got 3 different types of carrots. You could have bagged carrots, you could have loose carrots, or you could have really fancy carrots. It's quite unlikely that there'd ever be the scenario where you'd need to buy all 3 different types of carrots in the same visit to the online shop. However, it's much more believable that you as a customer could buy the 3 different types of carrots across multiple visits, because say you're cooking your roast dinner on a Sunday, you're probably not really bothered what type of carrots you're actually going to use to put in your dinner. So in that case, the 3 different types of carrots could be classed as competing products. This example is also a little bit oversimplified because it's quite hard to see how you could spot the relationships and then validate whether they're quite rare or whether they actually are quite overwhelming. But if you were to perform this kind of analytics across a full customer base of data, you could pick out the strongest relationships that are actually apparent across the full product range. And then that leads to really powerful insights about your customers' shopping habits overall. So that's affinity. I'll move on to attributes. So as I said, attributes are ways in which we can describe products. And you can also use attributes to describe customers and stores, but I'll focus on products in this case. So back to our example of the red shoelaces, here are some examples of attributes that you could use to describe them. And attributes can be created in lots of different ways, but I'll give you 3 examples to talk through. First of all, you can create attributes using product metadata, so like colour, brand, or price. So in this case, the attributes that you can see here, such as red, low price, and polyester, they're all examples that could be created using product metadata. Another way is that you can auto-generate attributes using natural language processing and customer review data. And this is really powerful because it means then your attributes are describing the product in a way that a customer would describe it to someone else. So some examples of these could be like fashionable, flimsy, good value. They're all examples of attributes that could be created in this way. And lastly, you can use affinity to develop attributes. So taking a bit more of a data-led approach. So you could get groups of customers that are really likely to buy the shoelaces, and then you could profile the customers by their demographics to then get inferences about what types of customer as a whole are likely to buy the shoelaces. So in this case, young is an example of a attribute that could describe the shoelaces based on demographic. But if you were thinking of a different type of product, so maybe like a board game, an attribute like family would maybe be tagged against that using this. So that's attributes, and then you can use affinity and attributes in combination to get customer need states. But I'll do a really quick recap before we go on to that. So affinities are how customers can interact with products. Attributes are how customers view products. And then using these two in combination allows us to build a really comprehensive picture of why a customer actually needs a product. When you know why the product is needed by a particular customer, you can group products into collections that are satisfying a particular need state. And then you would imagine that these groups of products would all have similar attributes and that they'd all be competing with each other. And that's why they then make really good substitutions. Once you have these groups, you can describe your full product hierarchy by how the products are needed by your customers. And then this allows you to, when you're looking across the full range, you can represent the decisions that the customers are making as they're going through your store. And then you can imagine that if you then wanted to automate the decisions, it's a lot easier to do that in a customer-centric way. So another example, Hyper Harry's back and we know he's after the red shoelaces. That's what he's here to buy. But let's try and demonstrate the decisions he's making as he's going through our online store. So as soon as he enters, the first decision he needs to make is, does he want to shop fashion or does he want to shop grocery? So we know he wants to shop fashion, so we'll go for that one. Next up, within fashion, does he want clothes or does he want shoes? So he's after his laces, so we're going for shoes. Next is within shoes, does he want to buy actual shoes or is he after some accessories for his shoes? So laces are definitely accessories, so we'll go there. And within accessories, does he want insoles or does he want laces? So again, we know he's after laces. The final decision he needs to make is what colour does he want his laces to be? So does he want them to be red or does he want them to be a multitude of other colours? So we know he's after red shoelaces. So we'll go there. And once he's made all of these decisions, he's left with a selection of products to pick from. And this is the customer need state. So in this case, even if, say, Harry had wanted that top type of red shoelace you can see there, if that was unfortunately out of stock, then it's quite easy to imagine that he'd be fairly happy if it was swapped for any of the others. And then again, looking back across the full product range, you can see the decisions he's made to get to that point. So grouping products in this way is a lot better if you're wanting to automate the customer's decisions rather than, say, grouping them by like what country they were made in. And that was customer need states. So hopefully you can now see that if you were to automate decisions like this using affinity analytics, it would hopefully solve a lot of the problems that we saw earlier. So these really bad substitutions wouldn't be made. So if in this case, in terms of affinity, there's no reason really that the shoelaces and the sweets would ever be classed as competing products because there's no reason that they couldn't be bought within the same visit. In terms of attributes, I can't, other than maybe red, I can't think of any attributes that you could use to describe both of them. Because if we brainstorm some for sweets, you'd maybe have like food or sweet or tasty or high sugar, none of which you'd use to describe your shoelaces. So using the affinity and the attributes in combination, these two products would never be put in the same customer need state. So if one was out of stock, you wouldn't recommend to substitute it for the other. And before I close, I just wanted to make the quick point that affinity analytics isn't just useful in retail. Quite a lot of brands are using it, most predominantly Netflix, and Netflix use it to do a lot of their recommendations. So I provided you with a nice screenshot of my Netflix homepage here. So please don't judge any of my TV choices that have been recommended for me. But Netflix use affinity analytics to personalize loads of stuff on this page for me. So first up, they're personalizing the actual sections of TV shows that it thinks I'll like. So for me, it's recommended young adult films and rom-coms. It's obviously recommending the actual shows that it thinks I'll like, but more interestingly, it's using affinity analytics to personalize the visual, to describe the show to me, to the one that it thinks will appeal the most. And it's not just Netflix. Loads of brands are using affinity analytics, and it doesn't just have to be used for substitutions or recommendations. It can be used for like product ranging, pricing, supply chain management, and demand transference. And a lot of companies like this are fairly open with how they're using data and using affinity analytics in combination. So if you're wanting to find out any more, a quick Google will probably serve you quite well, or feel free to drop me a message and I can try and point you in the right direction of some good resources. So thanks very much. Happy to take any questions if there are any. Nope, I assume not. in which case I'll hand over to Jag for the panel. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Jessie. So afternoon, guys. My name's Jag Tumba, and I'm the BDM at Hyper. So before I go on to introduce the panel, I'll give a quick brief introduction on myself. So having spent the last 3 years working in data recruitment, which also involved supporting Hyper build out their fantastic team of consultants. Late last year, I obviously got presented the opportunity to join Pete, the rest of the team at Hyper, and also was joined by Anna Hinchcliffe, who is our new marketing manager. So the key areas for me were to grow out the footprint within retailers and brands, continue to help Hyper build their own brand, and drive engagement through events like we're hosting today. So moving on to the fantastic panel that we've got here. If you'd like to share your videos and come off mute, starting with Charlotte. If you'd like to introduce who you are, what you do, and what your career path has been today, that'd be great.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Charlotte. I work at Asda at the moment. I've been a data engineer for 8 years, working in large consultancies, then small consultancies, financial sort of work, or government, or NHS Digital, or at Asda retail. So yeah, 8 years. I did an advanced apprenticeship. So I didn't go to university and do the traditional route. I got my degree through my company and then have just continued then. But no one's actually asked about my degree when I changed jobs. So I don't know if I would come to me for any degree tips.
Cool. Moving on to Michelle.
Yeah, so I'm Michelle Morris. I'm an associate professor at the University of Leeds and a fellow of the Alan Turing Institute, which is our National Institute for Data Science and AI. My research is in nutrition and lifestyle analytics, which means that I use novel and large consumer data sources and data science methods to better understand nutrition and physical activity behaviours. I'm involved with the Consumer Data Research Centre at Leeds, and I co-chair the academic advisory group for the Leeds Institute for Data Analytics Data Scientist Programme, which is a development scheme for data scientists, and I teach spatial analytics to health informatics students and opportunities with consumer data to precision medicine students. Kind of a convoluted career path with quite a lot of degrees in it, where I started out with a degree in neuroscience, so brains, and went on to a graduate position at EMIS Health, which is a company that provides software for doctors. And frighteningly, that's 20 years ago now. But unbeknown to me, that's where my data science career started, working with large volumes of clinical information and supporting doctors to record more consistent clinical data. This is where I learned basic coding skills in multiple programming languages and to appreciate the importance of quality data capture, clinical data classifications and standards, and the lengthy processes that sit behind each of these to make sure things happen smoothly. After 7 years, I had what I thought was going to be a career change and studied a master's in nutrition, obesity and health, which was lots of stats and epidemiology methods, before doing an interdisciplinary PhD. I then had a bit of time with a university spin out of a tech company before moving to work with consumer data and lifestyle behaviours, which is what I'm doing now.
We could probably spend the rest of the session just speaking about Michelle's experience, but we'll move on to Anna.
Yeah, hello, I'm Anna and I'm a senior data scientist at Hyper. So I've been a data scientist for the last 4 years and my career is a bit convoluted like Michelle's. So I started off as an environmental engineer, so engineering, but very different from data, and then moved on to a PhD as I was interested in research. And while doing my PhD, I realized that actually academia wasn't my path, and fell in love with analytics and data science and got a job at Yorkshire Water where I spent a few years and then moved into a data science position, and here I am now. Cool.
So I think it's fairly apparent as to why we've chosen to pick our particular panelists that we've got today. Okay, moving on to questions. So having spoken to a number of people in the field, we've created what we think are the top 5 questions to pose to our panel today. So obviously some of our attendees and listeners may have other questions they'd like to pose. So if you'd like to use the Q&A function at the bottom of Zoom, then that'd be great. And hopefully we can get through as many of those towards the back end of the session. But so to kick things off, Charlotte, would you like to explain to me what a day in the life is for you at Asda?
Yes, so I work in a team of data scientists who are all doing supply chain forecasting. So a lot of the work that I do is around creating a platform that enables them to be able to do that. I jump in where they've got coding issues or if tests are failing. I also help support in changing logic around. So obviously working in a big data ecosystem, you're going to use a lot more Spark than you are going to use things like pandas, which can be a bit slower. So just supporting people, educating, mentoring, coaching, but also being able to provide them the resources that they need. So working really closely with them to be able to do that.
And Anna, how does your experience differ, obviously working at a consultancy?
Well, I think every day can be different. It can be a 50-50 meeting / solo working. It can be some team working, but it's also, it might not be as technical as Charlotte's. So sometimes the best solution for the client might be very simple. It might not involve any modeling at all, but it's more statistics related. So there can be a bit of modeling there's quite a lot of storytelling via PowerPoint and just working on how to best explain the concepts and how to best get value for the client, basically. So that's the difference, I think. It just gets a lot more explaining and a lot more teamwork.
Michelle, have you got anything to add from obviously working at a university?
Yeah, I suppose it's quite varied from my perspective as well. And as I mentioned before, like some days I am involved heavily with teaching with different types of students. Trying to build capacity and promote data science within different fields. I also do some advisory work, so things like using analytics in the national food strategy. And then I do a lot of work with partners because where I'm based in the Leeds Institute for Data Analytics, which might be a bit different to Anna's experience of academia, but we do a lot of working with people who actually generate the data. So a lot of time spent with supermarkets and seeing where our research interests align with problems that they're tackling as well. And then no one's mentioned it yet, but I spend a lot of time thinking about governance and data licenses and the kind of nuts and bolts of being able to do the data science.
Yeah, all that good stuff that no one really likes to speak about. Moving on to our second question then. So for you, Anna, has your expectations lived up to the reality in working in data science?
So I think one of the things that everyone always mentions, and I'm not going to be an exception, is the fact that everyone always thinks it's all about the modeling. You come in and immediately you apply the fanciest model you can find, but there's a lot of work that has to be done on the data, and that's 80-90% most of the time. But that's actually quite interesting because I feel like it's almost putting together a jigsaw or trying to solve a mystery, trying to figure out why are things going wrong, what do I need to be careful about, what do I need to maybe potentially remove or add. So all of that side of things is definitely something that is different from the expectation from the outside, but I think it enriches the role and it gives quite a lot in terms of the experience.
And Charlotte, obviously having previously worked in a predominantly engineering capacity, how has it lived up for yourself?
So I think the main thing that has been helpful with moving from engineering into data science world is that a lot of what I do is just problem solving. So if somebody comes and says that they want data, they want it here, they want it now, and they want it from this location. But when you drill into what they actually need, what they're trying to use it for, 9 times out of 10, there's like little tweaks that you probably want to make to the processes. And I feel like that's been really handy coming into the data science world, where a large portion of it is trying to just understand the problem. What are you actually trying to fix? Should you just go in and fix what somebody's asking you to go and like try and work out or forecast? Or should you bring it back to a bit of a bigger picture and work out if there are other areas that you could target that would have a larger impact?
Yeah, Michelle, to add on that?
Yeah, I completely echo what both Anna and Charlotte said, that the data engineering and the data science are not really that distinct. So loads of time on data cleaning. But I suppose the other thing is that you always end up spending time learning, because either what you were trying to do wouldn't work, so you spend time, reading up online on platforms for why that hasn't worked well, or actually trying to work out if the algorithm that you want to apply is the best one, or whether actually there's something new that would be
Oh, I don't know if something's just broken up there. We still with you, Michelle? Right. Okay, whilst Michelle is having some technical difficulties, I'll go on to the next question. So Anna, what blend of soft and technical skills would you say are most important to a career in data science?
So technical skills are definitely important in terms of coding, and then we could debate all day about the kind of language you want to go in and the statistical side of things. But I find that communication is definitely key. Communication and being able to storytell as well, which is not something that you learn or that you come into the role knowing straight away, something you can definitely develop and grow into. But you can create the best thing, the best model, the best results. But if you don't know how to get them across to your client or the rest of the business, wherever you might be, then it's just going to get lost, basically.
I'm assuming you're going to echo that, Charlotte.
Yeah, pretty much.
Michelle, have we got you back?
Yep, sorry, audio glitch. Yeah, my biggest thing was about storytelling as well. But it is having the appetite to seek out new solutions to challenges and thinking outside the box, understanding the wider context.
So in terms of the tools that you guys have found key to perform in your respective roles, and again, looking to get into the industry or for people to even diversify their toolkits whilst being in the industry, what would you suggest or recommend learning these technologies? I'll put that question to you, Charlotte.
I think what's always good to know and always be aware of is the entire life cycle of data. So not just what you're going to do when you've got it and it looks good, but what do you do if it's not good? What do you do in terms of making sure that those processes work consistently? So just the standard SDLC side of things, making sure that you have proper tests, end-to-end tests, and you're checking things. Those things are really important, even if you don't necessarily know how to code amazingly. Being able to turn up to an interview and say, like, okay, I'm going to have to brush up on coding, but I've got all of this side down. I know that you're going to want some end-to-end tests. I know that you're going to want to make sure that if there's a network failure, that it doesn't all blow up, things like that.
Anna, obviously working in a consultancy at the minute, how have you gone about learning new technologies to solve client-specific problems?
Well, there's a lot of Googling, not going to lie, a lot of YouTube involved. And I think it's amazing to me that how much there is out there that we can actually use free without having to pay anything. There's obviously courses you can get on, but YouTube and Google are amazing and out there. And I think what's useful to me, I found, is having a concrete problem to solve. So as you're saying, with a new client, if there's a new, well, recently I've had to look into R, which I've never used before, being a Python fan for a long time. But having a specific problem, having something to do, something to solve, meant I knew what to search for, I knew what to look at, and it might take a bit, but there's definitely, that's the way as far as I'm concerned, just finding a problem, going at it.
Yeah, I think it's just quite encouraging for the listeners to hear that it's just a case of getting stuck in and applying themselves onto these challenges and these courses. Michelle, have you got anything to add, having obviously coming through the university and then being a part of the Alan Turing Institute?
Yeah, so I mean, there's all sorts of different courses people can do, from, you know, undergraduate, masters, even PhDs, and there's some really cool programs now that are incorporating artificial intelligence and data analytics. Like we've got a 4-year masters and PhD program, but also there's loads of free stuff, like people are saying, with Coursera and Data Camp. And I think the things that come up sort of over and over that people seem to want to learn now are Python and R programming languages specifically. And there's a lot of interest in kind of interactive dashboards for communicating and from these softwares, so things like R Shiny and Plotly, for the storytelling aspects of data science. But yeah, hands-on stuff, solving problems is the best way to put any learnings to action.
Yeah. And what tips would you offer our listeners getting into research and jobs?
I think building really good networks is important. So things like this community as an example, and to always be prepared to keep learning. Whatever stage you're at, there's always opportunities to learn, whether it's really specific programming elements or if it's more about communicating. But other than that, if you want to get into this area, then do it. It's so broad and diverse. I think you've heard from all of us that we've applied it in different settings. If you are looking to go to a different setting, I would really kind of learn some stuff and understand that domain area, like from health to retail and academic consultancy. Because if people have all got the same skills and you understand the setting and the wider context, that'll make you stand out at interview, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely a thriving industry. Charlotte, your thoughts?
I agree with Michelle that you kind of have to be prepared that you're going to be learning all the time. Big data is moving so fast, all the technology is changing so fast, the way that you utilize it can be so varied depending on the company that you're working for. It's really intense sometimes trying to keep up with all the changes. That's what makes it a really unique industry, because you're never far behind from somebody else. That you don't walk in and somebody already has 25 years experience in doing exactly what you're doing. You can be just as good or better than anybody else as long as you want to put yourself to the test and try and learn stuff. Get comfortable with asking loads of questions. Don't be that person that sits in a meeting room that's like, I understand. Just ask everything, because that's how you're going to do really well. If you can fully understand it and you know that you know it, and you've written down about 4 million notes that you can look back on, you'll know when things change, because that's what happens. Sometimes you ask somebody the problem's changed and you're like, what? You didn't say that 2 hours ago. So it's good to understand it, truly understand it, and not try to save face. That's kind of it.
I was just going to pick you up on that. Do you think the shift towards remote working has made it more difficult for the graduates and the juniors coming through, because they might not be as open to asking those questions, jumping on a Zoom call?
I think it's really hard, and I think that's where we talk a lot about how hard it is to be a woman or a minority in this sort of industry, but actually I reckon the hardest, well, probably not the hardest, but it's certainly hard, is if you are somebody who's quite reserved and shy and you sit back, because people, it relies a lot on engagement. So the more engaged you are, the more you're going to learn, the more you're going to grow, and the more you'll get out of it. Because I think Anna and Michelle have probably experienced this. Sometimes you go to Google a problem and there is no answer to it. And a lot of it is just collaborating, speaking to people that you can speak to, working together. Working from home makes that a lot more difficult if you aren't a sort of bubbly, like engaged person, confident. But I think that hopefully as we transition to being able to do like some sort of hybrid working or being in the office and you can work out what you're comfortable with, I think that we should all be aware that other people aren't as comfortable as we are, and we should always make the effort to try and engage people where we can, especially if we're all working from home.
Definitely. Anna?
To be honest, she said it all. I feel like it's hard to top that one.
Not a problem. So the final question from myself, and I'd just like to note that we have got an all-female panel, which hasn't been pre-planned or anything, but it is great to see this representation. And with it being International Women's Day yesterday and the theme being breaking the bias, my question to Michelle was going to be, how do you feel women are represented in data science?
Yeah, in the university, we're certainly seeing more and more women coming in at the kind of early career stages, and we're not quite equal every year on like our intern program for development, but it's close to equal men and women. We're sort of wider in the industry. I mean, the people that I work with are often women in data science in retail organisations, which is really encouraging. I think there's still a bit more to be done to get women into the more senior roles, but it's certainly changed through my career and seeing more and more women.
Yeah, Charlotte, Anna?
Yeah, I'm happy to go next. So I agree with Michelle. I think there's sort of a barrier that stops women from getting to senior roles, but from my point of view, yeah, things seem to be changing, more and more seem to be coming up, and I think that's due to the fact that we have some really good role models as well. Some of the influencers, sort of data influencers on LinkedIn that we're seeing, they're definitely doing a lot to promote those kind of roles. So I think that's what we need. Basically, we need people to know that it's a viable career, it's a good career, and they can get into it.
I would just say how valuable it is to have women, like as diverse a population as you can, because you're going to consider more things when you get asked for the problem. There's a really interesting book on that actually about invisible women in data, and how by not having people from different backgrounds, even so not having a collection of backgrounds, if everybody's done the exact same route to get into this, they're not going to have the same considerations and have the same ideas, and that can really limit you when it comes to coming up with a product that's really good for everybody and not just good for the people that were developing it.
Cool. Well, thanks for obviously running through that, guys. I think quite a lot of our listeners will be keen to know how the industry is shaped and how it's looking to shape, I suppose, in the next 5 to 10 years. But if I now dip into the Q&A function, one of our questions that's come through from Rupika, I'm learning Tableau. What skills can I add to my toolkit to get into data analytics? And let's go with Michelle.
Yeah, I think Tableau's widely used. It's a really interesting question because I think there are so many tools in data science toolkits, and many of them do similar things. So with Tableau, it's the licensed software, so it might not be available everywhere that you want to go in the future. So I think having an open source product in your toolkit, something like R or Python, would be really useful, beneficial. I do a lot of spatial analytics, so we have licensed software like ArcGIS, which is really easy to use, but then open source equivalents like QGIS. So, I mean, there's a few to get you started.
Yeah, is there anything you guys want to follow up with? I do want to say that Excel gets neglected, so it is worth noting, and I've had it through lectures that I've spoken at, that there does need to be some emphasis around or drawn around that, because you will use it.
So from my point of view, and this echoes what Michelle was saying, is so it's more about the principles behind it, because you can then apply them to a variety of software. It can be open source, can be behind a paywall. But if you have an idea on how to structure the chart you want to make, so being sort of closer to the basic kind of ideas and everything that helps you design what you then present, that's going to be key, and that means you can apply it wherever you go, really.
So just had a remark there from John saying that I should stick to using Excel. John, I don't even use Excel. I just stick to LinkedIn, quite frankly. But moving on, another question that we've had come through is, any suggestions about resources to learn storytelling? I'll open the floor.
Yeah, okay, sorry, Michelle. Just saying that there is, so it's going back to social media again, LinkedIn and Twitter, there's quite a lot of data scientists, or it's actually data visualization experts that are posting quite a lot of the work they do, and they make the code open as well. So it's something that people can get inspired by and have a look through. And otherwise, it could be, just looking at examples, in my opinion, just seeing how other people might be doing things and sort of developing and taking inspiration from there.
Yeah, we're going to say something similar, but I think there are resources out there purely about visualization. So it doesn't matter what language you're using, which is the point that was made before. And the names of them escape me, but I believe Alan Smith from the Financial Times did something a little while ago. And there's a name of a visualization expert who's got quite a lot of books, whose name's totally gone. But if you kind of search for, visualization principles, I'm sure there'll be lots of resources out there, and then those principles are transferable completely.
Moving on to the next question from Andy. So Andy's question is, what do you believe are the biggest barriers to adoption of data science / data-driven practices in the retail industry or other industries?
So if I could jump in, I should give it to Charlotte, actually, she's in this one. But sometimes I think people are quite frightened of coding and the fact that data science, they can't do data science in Excel as an example, or that that they aren't technical enough to be able to share the learnings from data science. But I think, you know, it's been so nice to hear so much about data storytelling today, because that is data science to me. And you need people and teams that can do all different aspects of that, from the coding through to really being able to share messages to a relevant audience.
I was just going to say, what's a really hard metric is how do you prove it's been successful? How do you prove that you are saving a company money? And if you can't turn around to the VP and be like, oh yeah, by the way, I've saved you £4 million by doing this. Especially when you first start out and you're making like a small notebook to go and prove something out, and you're like, look, I'm like 99% accurate. But without having tangible things and somebody on board, you struggle to change the culture of a business. So what usually happens is you need your managers to be really into it and really excited to see the changes.
Yeah, and I agree with Charlotte, to be honest. And I think that's another of the key sort of soft skills that a data scientist should have, which is helping the business seeing the value in what they're presenting, and helping showing that kind of aspect of the model, the analysis, whatever they've produced. I think also, in my opinion, one of the problems is sometimes the data is in a variety of systems, is very fragmented. So it takes a bit of a plan and a structure to bring everything together and to be able to get the value from it. Otherwise, it's just a bit difficult getting everything that you need. And sometimes different people know different things. So it's hard to know exactly where everything is and what you need to trust and what shouldn't be trusted.
Yeah, I think John's just echoed Charlotte's point around always linking the findings and the presentations back to the specific business question, and then ending with that, which means that so that the commercial users are understanding as to the work that you've obviously implemented. Next question from Sangeeta. What are the steps to go for data science and data analytics? I think what she's trying to say is internships, training. What platforms have you used? And what would you recommend to our listeners?
So if I can plug our Leeds Institute of Data Analytics, Data Science internship program. So this is a paid position for 12 months where you work on 2 6-month projects and have a training budget to pay to go on courses to learn the skills that you need to solve the problem. And it's nearly always working with a partner as well. So it is a super competitive program, and there's not loads of them out there. Other internship programs, so HDI UK, so Health Data Research UK, do some, and I know there's quite a good program in at Glasgow. But I think it depends on your career stage, because I think there are sort of short kind of student internships that might be paid or not paid very much. But then there are, like our program, a lot of people use it as for career changes, because it is a paid development opportunity. So I think there's probably a subtle difference between the two, as to bear that in mind when you're looking for opportunities.
Yeah. Charlotte, Anna, anything to add in terms of resources that you may have used? I know Charlotte obviously used to work at Infinity Works, and they provide an internship.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of businesses out there, but you might not be able to find data specific ones. I think they're significantly rarer than just a standard software engineering one. It's a niche industry in comparison to other areas, in my opinion. I don't know if anyone's going to be like, well, everyone does it, but there are internships, there are grad schemes, there are places to go and do job changes. If you just if you want to do it, you'll be able to find a route in. It's just that you might also want to prep, that you probably need to come with a small level of, oh, did you lose me?
I think I was lost. I think the bandwidth is quite low, but going on to the question that's just come in from Slow, how widely is big data used and what tools besides Spark are important to learn?
If you want to understand how table relationships work between your storage and your platform sort of thing. So if you can understand that your data is in a big data storage location, but that you're not accessing it via that, having that level of awareness in the same way as if you're going to work on websites, just understanding what MVC is. If understanding big data is actually quite intimidating at the start, but if you can just get some of the key things down, that will make you stand out significantly in terms of interviewing. Having done multiple interviews with grads, it seems to be something that people definitely aren't interested in when they're doing their prep for interviews, and it's something that's very exciting that someone can turn around and be like, oh, external tables, partitioning, anything like that. It makes you stand out.
I find that people's perceptions of big data are quite different, because there's certainly people that I work with who say, I've been working with big data for a long time because I've got 50,000 people in a cohort and however many hundreds of data points for each of them, that's big data. And people who say they use big data and they're still using Excel, which I think for certain tasks you can. So I think there's a context to that as well, but being able to understand the different levels of that is really helpful, and the context again within which it sits.
I think that ties in with the question before. A lot of companies are maybe scared of this idea of big data and scared of what they need to do with it, but actually to get into big data, it takes a while. Like a lot of the companies, a lot of the data sets, a lot of the solutions are actually not at that level yet.
Cool. Yeah, completely agree. And the final question is going to come from myself. So what tip would you give a data science graduate going into an interview for a retailer or a consultancy?
I've rattled mine off. I did that as we were going along. It's everything I've already said, those ones.
Yeah, I'd say be passionate about it. So I work in data science, but it's applied to nutrition and health and physical activity, because those are things that, are massive problems in the world right now. And food and how we use food, is the biggest problems like obesity and climate change. And actually I can bring analytical experience to trying to solve real big problems. And then that makes me very excited about what I do. So going into an interview, it's like you're sort of selling yourself a bit, aren't you? So all the things that we've talked about already around data science, but kind of being passionate about the area, or if you can go into a role that you really bought into, I think that'll shine through in an interview.
To me, is also being honest about what you know and what you don't, because sometimes people tend to sort of pick up what they know about specific languages or other things. But I think it's better to see someone who admits they might not know everything in a certain field, but they're open to learn and they're happy to learn and they're motivated. I think that's the most important bit, the motivation and the interest in learning, curiosity about the field and everything that comes with it.
Yeah, and I think just for people to showcase their talents, their recognitions, I'd recommend for every data science graduate, someone looking to come through the ranks, to get themselves on LinkedIn, to connect with some of the leaders in the industry, share some of the challenges that you've potentially done on Kaggle, talk about some of the courses that you've taken on, and just start to engage within the community, because I think it's the best way to build a brand, and for you to get yourself out there, really. I think that's it from me. So that wraps up our interactive discussion. So I'd just like to thank our panelists, Charlotte from Asda, Michelle from the University of Leeds, and Anna from Hyper, for all taking the time out today to give our listeners and attendees an idea of how to excel in what's currently a thriving data science and analytics industry. So thanks once again, guys.
Thanks, Jag, and thank you to the panel. I think that was a fantastic set of insights from Michelle and Anna and Charlotte, and thanks also to Jag, actually, because having tried to perform that type of role myself, I know it's pretty tricky, actually, coordinating all the responses, looking at questions coming through and fielding them. So well done to everyone. Also, big thanks to Jessie for her talk on online shopping substitution fails and what to do to avoid similar catastrophes. So we're going to follow up with a summary of the event, a link to the recording, and also some questions about the event, how you found it, what we can improve for next time, things that you'd like to hear about so we can continue to improve. We're also going to invite you to a LinkedIn group, so people who want to be part of this community and interact with other people, consume content, that kind of thing. We've got the opportunity to do that, so we'll send you a note, and then it's entirely up to you about whether you want to join that community and engage. So thank you everyone for joining today. Hope you find it useful. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we hope to see you next time. Thanks.